Hey everyone, it's Stove here. Today, or tonight, in the middle of the night actually, at 12:30 a.m., we're going through the college football schedule for what is, I believe, week 6. Yep. And we got ourselves some good ones here. I'm going to obviously be running through the 7 teams. You got the 7 teams that I've picked personally that I think are going to be games that you should keep your eyes on to be pretty darn solid or underrated games that a lot of people should be focusing a little bit more on than some of these other games. Now, I could be wrong, obviously, but I also don't want to just take your eyes off of one game like Iowa State versus Cincinnati. I think that's going to be a pretty good team, pretty good matchup too, but I don't necessarily see it as hugely important as some of these other matchups can be for the teams facing in them. Anyway, so and obviously this is an order of their schedule, but first one is going to be Texas versus Florida, Vandy versus Alabama, Virginia versus Louisville, West brain fart, sorry. Maryland plays at home against Washington, Texas Tech versus Houston, Mississippi State versus Texas A&M, and Duke versus California. Obviously, a couple of those games you may not think are very important, or you guys think aren't as shouldn't get as many eyes as what I'm saying they should. But again, that is really just my opinion. Obviously, you guys can comment down below and tell me what you guys think. But anyway, like I said, we have other matchups such as Kentucky versus Georgia, Iowa State versus Cincinnati, which I think at Cincinnati, Iowa State's going to have a very tough matchup. And in my opinion, I think I've always said that home court advantage or home field advantage is a true thing. And if Cincinnati makes it any closer than I think they will, then I wouldn't be surprised if it is by like a field goal or by a touchdown or even goes into overtime like we have seen in the last week or two. So pretty solid matchups there. Wisconsin versus Michigan is, I think, okay. Illinois versus Purdue, that's okay. Boston College and Pittsburgh, Clemson versus North Carolina. It's kind of going to be interesting, though I do think Clemson's going to, the way North Carolina is playing, it might be a decent matchup, but Clemson just has way better talent. Though they haven't shown that talent, I think they are just a way better team, or can be a way better team than North Carolina. Kansas State and Baylor, that's actually a pretty solid game if both teams come to play. $8 for tickets. Yeesh. Wake Forest, Virginia, Ohio versus Ball State, Oklahoma State versus Arizona, Penn State versus UCLA, and finally we get to our first game, our first matchup of the day. That will be my my Stoves 7, I guess. I don't know. Still working on that particular name. But anyway, Texas, number 9, versus unranked Florida University. Obviously, some people may think that this is something that really shouldn't be like, whatever. But I think it's not just me saying this. I think it is some analysts too. But Florida really is the or will be the second best defense that Texas and Arch Manning faces this season. Obviously, you had Ohio State in that first week, and a lot of people thought Archie Manning was just a washed guy already in college, even though he faced the number one defense that he will face this entire year, more than likely, including playoffs, in my opinion, because Ohio State's defense is pretty darn talented. Not taking anything away from any other defense out there in college, but it's very much hard to combat. There's only like maybe a handful of teams that can really say or argue that they have possibly a slightly better defense. But I do think Florida, even though they had lost 3 games straight, they had lost against teams that are ranked in the top 10, mind you. So they lost against Miami. And they... Oh, why am I blanking now? Oh, yes. They also lost against South Florida, but I do think South Florida is a underrated small school that can have a huge impact this year. One of the handful of teams that can do that this year. However, again, Florida is still a solid team. I think they're part of the handful of prestigious schools that have talented players, that have all kinds of talented players from all walks of life. However, whether it has to do with the coaching or the mentality or whatever it's really got to do with, maybe even some injuries here and there, but whatever it's got to do with, it's just mainly the fact that they are losing, that a lot of people are thinking that, oh, Florida University, they're not what we think they were going to be. And that's just not the case. I do think they still have that solid defense. I do think that unless Texas defense makes their Florida's offense look real bad, I don't necessarily see even this being more than... I don't see this being more than 50 points, in my opinion. And if it is, then it's only because Florida did not come to play at home. But I think since they do, I think you have more of a chance of Florida's defense really trying to pressure and contain Archie Manning's talent for throwing the ball and trying to get his feet going here and there. Because I do think if you have Archie Manning start scrambling around, that's whenever he really starts to get loose, really starts to get confident. And when that happens, then you're running out of options to be able to, take this man out, unless you do take this man off the field one way or another. But like I said, Florida is that team that I think is going into their home facing Texas, and I think they'll be fighting for whatever they can, especially even if they beat Texas, they're more than likely going to get pushed right back up the top 25. And even if that doesn't happen, they still have a chance of going to top 25 next week whenever they face top 10 Texas A&M, which in my opinion will still most likely end up being in the top 10 and still be undefeated. But again, love to see the defense in Florida. I do think that the offense needs tons of work, and once you guys push that offense through, maybe it does become a total, a more larger total between the two teams of how many points are being scored than just 50 points. But like I said, if anything, I see Texas scoring 20 and Florida scoring 13 probably. I think that's reasonable, or even 16, and trying to do their best to get like that last ditch effort, but can't because Texas defense is just, I feel like, going to be too much for Florida. But obviously I'm going to pick Texas to win this game, but Archie Manning, I think, will end up having his struggles against that Florida secondary and even get pressured with that front seven being able to blitz the way that they are and contain the way that they're able to contain. So not going to be surprised if that happens. So we'll see on that one. Then you got Vandy versus Alabama. Between the burning social media posts between the players of each team, and at the same time you have players going back and forth with one another, not only on social media, but somewhat in person last year, before and after the game. It was very much something that was blowing up ever since then. And guess what? Alabama and Vandy, it's not just Alabama that had done this, but Vandy. Mostly it's been Vandy that's been kind of shit talking, but Alabama has circled that scheduled game date. They know the time. They know that as soon as they wake up, it is game time. We are going to punch Vandy in the mouth. We're going to punch Pervera in the mouth. Screw his 6 touchdowns that he just had. We're going in there to make his life a living hell and to make the rest of Vandy's squad a living hell. And you know what? That's good. You need that, as long as that doesn't blind you at home thinking that you guys are just going to destroy Vandy at home. As long as that doesn't blind you, good. It will more than likely be that Alabama scores between 30 and 40 points, and Vandy scores like between 20 and 28 points. At least that's what I feel like could happen. I would like to see Vanderbilt beat Alabama, only so it's kind of just a new thing. And not only does it build an even stronger rivalry against Alabama, and a lot of Alabama fans are still going to be like, this Alabama team is freaking ridiculous. First Florida State and now Vandy. This can't be this is a nightmare for the regular season. However, like I said, I think Alabama is ready to go full charge against Vanderbilt. And since it's on ABC, hopefully a lot of you guys are able to watch this game and absolutely indulge in all the playmaking that will be happening on both sides too, of Alabama's defense getting Pervera pressure, or Pervera using his feet but also using his arm power to be able to get long passes. And both quarterbacks have played absolutely amazing, and arguably both of them are in the top 5 talks for Heisman winners, for the Heisman Trophy. So I generally think this is going to be the standout game. As long as both teams come out, this is going to be the standout game of the week, or of the weekend. I think there's going to be no other game that is going to be close to this. And that's just my opinion, but that's also probably a lot of other people's opinion, just because of the amount of trash talk that's been happening, the amount of backstory between these two teams. It has not been sunshine and rainbows, I could tell you that right now. It has been bloody noses, broken arms, and destroyed helmets that we may end up seeing. We're going to see a lot of cheap shots on both sides. Whether or not you believe that's going to happen, that's up to you. But Alabama is going to get their licks in against Pereira, and Vandy's offensive line and defense is going to get their licks against Ty Simpson, even though Ty Simpson really hasn't been touched too much this year. So I think both of them haven't really been touched too much this year, and the only reason why they had been is only just because they scramble quite a bit. So putting themselves in the line of danger isn't exactly what they are going to want to go for, like right out the gate. So that first quarter, we'll probably end up not seeing too many points being made. However, once we get into that second half, it's going to show which team is going to want this win more and which team is just going to outplay the other team. That's literally what we're going to end up seeing. I don't think it's going to necessarily be a back and forth to like a full game length, but it'll definitely be something, like I said, to watch, or whether it's watching the highlights, whether it's watching the full game, you name it. That's what I feel like this is going to, like I said, I'm jumbling over my words because I'm just so very excited of this, but I'm actually very excited on the next matchup that we're going to talk about, which is Virginia versus Louisville. Oh, and sorry, I do think Alabama is going to end up just winning this game, but at the same time, as a fan, as a rooter for the underdog in this situation, I would like to also see Vanderbilt either make it a very close game to show that they are a real team. I mean, they've already kind of shown that, but even against a team like Alabama, who has talent, who has a very good coaching staff, it's going to show that if Vandy stays with Alabama that for most of this game, it will show that Vanderbilt does deserve to have more credit than what they are due. Just a little bit. But yeah. Anyway, Virginia and Louisville. Virginia had a very solid game, beating Florida State. I don't think anyone saw Florida State losing in overtime against Virginia. And that's really the only reason why Virginia is top 25 right now. And Louisville also has the chance to make themselves a top 25 team, with them also having some solid wins here and there. I think this is going to be a bigger deal because Virginia is, I think, right now they're top 4 in their conference, and Louisville, I think, it's like top 6, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is going to be, I think this game and the game that's going to be on right, like, as it's also going on. So, but with Virginia versus Louisville, Washington versus Maryland, I think both of these two teams are probably not perfect, but definitely very great matchups that we're going to be able to see. And luckily, they're in different conferences. So really, these two matchups are going to show us what these conferences are worth, the rest of their conferences are worth. Because obviously, you're not always seeing Louisville and Virginia battling it out and possibly even getting like a few 100,000 people watching. Same with Washington and Maryland. You're not going to necessarily really see that too much, but I think, especially since one is ESPN2 and the other one is the Big Ten Network. So if you have either of those, I do recommend watching one or both of them if you can. Try to keep your eye on both of them. But I think both teams are going to go back and forth. It's going to be a tough game for Virginia and Washington just because they are the away teams. But it will show what the rest of the ACC conference has with Virginia and Louisville, because like I said, we haven't seen these guys necessarily on top, even though it is still somewhat early. I think we're halfway through the regular season anyway for college football, so it's going to show us between the ACC and the rest of the Big 12 teams to see what they have against one another and who will actually come out. I think Virginia is going to end up actually winning that game, even though Louisville still has a good favorite, 6.5 at home. But I do think Virginia rides the high correctly against beating a top 10 ranked opponent at that time against Florida State at home. They ride that high into Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm telling you, they'll probably end up winning by a touchdown, maybe 10 points. And same with Washington. They ended up losing a solid game, not last week, but I think the week before, if I'm not mistaken. But Maryland, they were able to stay undefeated, I think. And I mean, I think that is still going to be a solid game for both of them, for all four teams in these two matchups. Like I said, it will show the competitiveness between the Big Ten, with the Big Ten, and the smaller teams for the Big Ten, and also somewhat of the smaller teams for the ACC. Of course, Louisville and Virginia have had their moments in college football history, same with Washington and Maryland. But at the same time, we don't usually see these guys in the type of spotlight that I think that they are going to be in after these two matchups are done. So anyway, going off of what those things were, like I said, solid matchups, and we're going to try to go and look for Texas Tech and Houston. But obviously you have a matchup like Syracuse and SMU. That's going to be a solid SEC conference game. Now, obviously, both teams have had their ups and downs, but that could definitely show us something. Hopefully they can both of us show us something new of their teams. Whether one of them's up and down and the other one's just up, or vice versa, but that's going to be a solid matchup too. So just, obviously take a gander at that. Nebraska versus Michigan State. I'm thinking Michigan State is still undefeated, and Nebraska obviously lost their only loss to Michigan. So that's actually going to be an even better game, especially since it's in Nebraska. So that'll be insane to watch. And now we obviously have Texas Tech and Houston. Texas Tech has 11.5. Obviously, you can see just right here down below my screen there almost covering it, but 11.5 of a favorite for Texas Tech. And I can understand why. If you look at the stats, I think Houston has only like 120 or 125 points for them, and allow only 54 points against their. So that they have a pretty solid team. Just looking at that, but Texas Tech, they have over 200 points for them, and they actually allow the least amounts points against them. So, and it's funny that Texas Tech has already technically played in their conference, well, a couple of games in their conference. So I think this is going to wreak trouble for Houston. But at the same time, Houston is a pretty solid team, and it could end up being actually a very close game, with it actually not being so many points, but only scoring really at most for either one of the teams like 20 points. But at the same time, it could end up just being the same exact thing we saw with Texas Tech and Utah, I believe, where a lot of people really thought that Utah had that chance to beat Texas Tech. And Texas Tech was like, you guys really thought that Utah had a chance? Psych. Let's put this like a buttload of points on them and not let them score more than 10 points, which was pretty damn impressive if you ask me. And if they do that again with Houston, it just will go to show that Texas Tech is trying to put out a message for any of the teams in their conference, but also put any other national team on notice that's in the top 25, more than likely the top 10, and show, hey, we're ready. We look ready, we feel ready, we're playing like we are ready to already go into the college playoffs. But this is basically what money gets you for the time being, until you actually face teams that basically either spend the same amount of money as you or make even more money than you and spend more money than you. It will just come down to who has the better players and who makes the least amount of mistakes towards the end of the game. But I do see Texas Tech winning against Houston while also being at Houston. Like I said, that's going to be a pretty solid Big 12 game. Probably be one of the only huge ones, in my opinion. That might be a hot take there. Obviously, I could have talked about Miami and Florida State. Florida State coming off of a huge loss in overtime against Virginia. But in retrospect, who is thinking that Florida State... Now, granted, they always have a chance, but Florida State does not look like the type of team that I think is going to win against a team like Miami. Now, at home, it's a little bit different. There is home field advantage. Like I said, I'm going to be a broken record whenever I say stuff like that, because it is true. You see plenty of college teams playing their hearts out at home. Now, sometimes whenever they're away, they get way more nervous. They get a little bit less of an edge to them. Whereas Florida State could end up making this an even closer game than what a lot of people are thinking. 4.5 favorite for Miami University is actually pretty fine with me if I'm being honest. Some of these people are being like, oh, 4.5, just shoot, that's way too little for a favorite with the Miami University team versus a home. Now, granted, it's at home for Florida State, but Florida State lost to Virginia. Who in the right mind is going to go to the college football playoffs whilst they have a loss against Virginia? I understand that. But at the same time, you don't necessarily really know how college football works if you're thinking that way, in my opinion, because like how Florida State lost against Virginia at Virginia, so it was in their, they had a bit more of an advantage, a bit more of an edge to them than Florida State did, even though I think Florida State also made a lot of mistakes pretty early on to put them in the position of going to overtime, and then also putting themselves in the position of losing that overtime during that overtime game. But I do think Florida State has also shown that even though they didn't necessarily face a fully ready Alabama, I do think they also have the ability to face any of these top 12 teams and be able to actually have a solid chance at beating them. Probably between a 38 and a 56% chance of beating every team, every single ranked 12 team right now. And, or I should say every single team that's ranked above them right now. And I don't really see anything wrong with that. I think that's actually probably pretty good, to be honest, for every Florida State fan, because that's more of a chance than a lot of these other D1s or D1 AA teams have when facing some of these at like a top 25, not just a top 12, but just a guy that's like barely making the top 25 and absolutely crushes someone like Rice or Troy, South Alabama, just to name a few. Obviously, I'm looking at these guys right now, but still. Now, Miami is playing great. Carson Beck playing phenomenal. But again, with Florida State being at home, that defense is still scary. You take your eye off them for 1 minute, they could expose you. Now, Miami hasn't been exposed yet. A lot of people thought it was going to be against Florida that they were going to be exposed to, just a tiny bit. However, it didn't happen. Hopefully Florida State can be able to find something different that Florida tried to do but wasn't necessarily very successful. But we will just have to see. I will be going with Miami beating Florida State in that one, even though they're not necessarily in my top 7 here. But anyway, going right below them, Mississippi State versus Texas A&M. Yes, I know the favorite is 16.5 with Texas A&M, and they're at home. So more than likely, you will probably see Texas A&M probably blow out Mississippi by like 28 points maybe. But with the SEC, you never know. Mississippi has done some interesting things. Even last year, I know it was a different group, but even last year and the year before that, they had made some upsets that not a lot of people thought that they were able to do. Even especially since they were in somewhat of a rut compared to some of the other conference teams that they had to face. But Texas A&M is going to win this game. It's really just not going to surprise me though if Mississippi State does somehow make it a lot closer game, maybe keeps it like a 1 possession or a 1.5 possession lead. 1.5 possession trailing for them, and we could possibly see something a little bit more exciting than just Texas A&M absolutely pimp slapping Mississippi State back over to Mississippi. And obviously I talked pretty quick on that one, but both of them have already 4 wins. I could see Mississippi getting their 5th win, but at the same time, Texas A&M just looks like a lot more charged team. Is also healthy too, with lack thereof of injuries, so that's pretty darn good to see that. Texas A&M also just is, a huge football school right now. I honestly I wasn't expecting them to do what they're doing right now. I didn't realize we were back in the 2010s seeing Texas A&M doing what they are doing, or the early 2010s, I should say. But still, solid matchup there. So you never know what can happen with these two, especially since SEC, they're crazy. So you never know. But anyway, you got Duke versus California. California being at home. I do think this is going to be probably one of the most underrated teams that I have in my top 7, because Duke, they had already won 2 conference games against their conference rivals in the ACC, being 3-2. Yes, they had lost twice, but it was against some solid teams. I'm pretty sure the only loss that I would say that they really should have lost to was against Illinois, if I'm not mistaken, in week 2 or 3. I'm pretty sure Toulouse was week 3 and Illinois was week 2. But California has also gotten a conference win already, so they're undefeated in their conference, but they aren't undefeated in regular season play with being 4-1. So I think this could be or end up being a more back and forth play, with it obviously showing that Duke, even though they're playing against California at their house, Duke actually has a 2.5 favorite. So this could actually be a more insane game than we all realize, and that is what's going to make this whole lineup fun and exciting. The 7 matchups that I talked about, and even like 2 to 3 extra matchups that I went deeper into than I thought I would tonight. I really do think you guys should all check those out if you can. If you can't, just try to keep an eye on them. Just keep the scoreboard on your phone or on your computer or something. Maybe even watch the highlights once you see that it was over or something, or like the very next day, just to see all of what happened, and if it was such a close game, what made it such a close game. But anyway, that was pretty much it. Obviously, I wasn't as detailed with like each individual player and the stats and stuff like that as I've used to do it, but at the same time, hopefully you guys still enjoyed my little commentary on what is going down this weekend, or I should say today, since it is 1:09 by the time I'm recording this, and hopefully it will be out a few hours before the games even start, but we'll see. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like, please subscribe, comment down below. Let me know what you think of my predictions and how well I'm doing commentary wise. Just speak from the heart. Don't break mine, but speak from the heart if you need to. Anyway, you guys, y'all have a good day or good night whenever you're watching this, and I hope you guys have a good one. Peace.